karma machine.
It is Sunday, my dude.
Hi, guys.
The thing that we just passed with out of... Hi, Josh.
Zane.
Casey, fix the
Max.
screen, Josh.
Hi.
Josh. Oh,
I'm gonna fix the screen.
I ruined Josh. I'm sorry.
Please.
Hi.
Oh, that was the wrong thing.
I'm
No.
here.
Let me do it. I understand Skype. All right, we got there. We arrived. Okay. All right.
I feel like we arrived at every video.
Reintroduction. Zane.
Hi!
Max.
Jazz
Joshua. And Jazz Hands. And
Yeah.
Joshua.
I'm still confused. Like, I never got this clear. Are you guys there?
You're next to me.
Josh.
Hi.
Point
High five.
right. Stop. Point right with your left hand.
That way.
And then, yes.
That's us.
Yes.
High five in that direction.
You're over there.
Yes.
Hi. Huh.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah! We
They
did a
high five. All right, we did a high five. So
Nice.
ethics. Ethics.
Yeah.
Say that 5 times fast.
Ethics.
Okay,
good.
I don't even
I'm
try.
resident genius and I demand a right to say my thesis.
Go for
basically.
it. All right.
Okay.
So Joshua has an argument about morality. Here is the thesis.
Yeah. So I had this idea at one point when I was driving in a car with two of my best buddies here on campus.
Car
Yeah.
thoughts.
We were on our way to do something somewhere. I can't really recall at this point. But the basic idea is we're all basically familiar with the three main moral systems, the three main ethical systems, where you have like deontology, it's sometimes called, is duty ethics, where you do things because they are wrong or right. So lying is wrong, murder is wrong, helping people in need is right, and so on and so forth. Then there's virtue ethics, where you you strive to be the right person, where you strive to have the right habits of behavior and build the right virtues in your moral character, and that leads to you doing the right things. And then lastly, there's that most people frown upon to a certain degree, called consequentialism, where the consequences of your actions sort of are the justification for whether or not it's right or wrong. And the basic idea there is that whatever happens as a result of your...
You have to wear it backwards.
Will you stop screwing with the hat?
Sorry.
Keep going.
I'm being a hipster.
Hey, actually, that looks amazing on you.
Okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know why I had to do that.
Consequentialism. The idea that the consequences of your actions are what justifies or condemns it, morally speaking. So if I do something and good results afterwards, my action was good. If I do something and bad results happen, my action is bad. So my thesis is essentially that all three of those systems boil down to what happens. For virtue ethics, it's relatively simple, but I have to go over duty ethics first. For duty ethics, the basic idea is that when you're thinking about a moral duty, there is no such thing as a moral duty that isn't enforced somehow. I mean, think about it. Is there any reason to obey a particular command if the person ordering you around doesn't have any sort of authority to enforce their demands? I mean, if there's no consequence for not doing what somebody tells you to do, is there any reason to do it? Is there any motive to doing it? I mean, I don't think so, honestly. And it's possible that maybe I'm wrong. Like, there are moral arguments that can probably be made against this. But just in general, it strikes me that there's no reason to have any sort of moral duty. In the absence of enforcement, there's no such thing as an actual moral duty. And so the fear of consequences or penalties for not fulfilling a moral duty, that's what leads people to actually fulfill moral duties. And so duty ethics boils down to consequentialism. You don't want the consequences, whether they're supernatural, whether they're temporal or whatever. You don't want the consequences of not fulfilling your moral duties, and so you fulfill them.
Yeah.
So it is. That boils down to consequentialism in my view. Now, the other thing with virtue ethics is it's just a little bit more distant than that. You still have some conception of doing the right thing, but in all honesty, it's sort of an interwoven consequentialism where you have becoming the right person is a consequence of
I
following
must
the right.
ask Professor Josh a question.
Wait.
Ah!
No, I was gonna go for a high five.
Okay, you scared me.
I will take the question high five thing. Okay? Yes.
Okay.
You're in the middle there.
I'm glad that we're doing this like a class. Okay.
You have to
Is
address
your
him as
dad-
Professor Josh.
Professor Josh.
Yes.
This might become a thing now. I love it.
Dr. Josh.
Professor Josh.
He's not a doctor.
When you refer to consequentialism, or your definition of a consequence, is it purely negative? Like, are we talking about purely negative consequences?
No.
Okay, because that really helps with virtue ethics, like moving virtue ethics into the camp of consequentialism, because you pursue your virtues because of a reward, which is rewards are consequences of you pursuing whatever virtue. Right?
Sort of an objective, right? You can think of it in terms of the objective.
Yeah.
When I lied to save the lives of Jews from the Nazi regime, for instance, my objective is saving the lives of Jews.
Yes.
And if I properly secure that, then what I've done is virtuous and morally justified. Most people would agree with that statement. Now, there are some people who say that I still violated my moral duty to tell the truth.
Yeah.
That's fair. I don't mind that as a criticism. And in fact, they might be right. It's possible that I still have some sort of supernatural moral duty, and having lied, I will suffer the consequences in the afterlife for lying to the Nazis, even though my reasons were to save the Jews and so on and so forth. It's certainly possible that I'll suffer more than I would have. It's you can have a debate over that, but it's still based on consequences. Yes, Casey in the middle over there.
Okay, Professor Josh. Since we've moved into the realm of the Christian moral argument of obviously the Christian doctrine, thou shalt not lie.
It's not necessarily Christian. The idea of an afterlife isn't unique to Christianity.
I'm not talking about the afterlife. I'm not talking about the afterlife. I'm talking about as a Christian, the morality of honesty. Right, that is a moral principle we adhere
telling
to.
the truth. Right.
And obviously the moral principle of saving lives. Something I would like, something that's interesting to note is during Jesus' ministry, the Pharisees got up in Jesus' face about him violating the Sabbath, and he responded with this. First off, he responded with this. So there's a story in I think it's 1 Samuel, where David goes into the tabernacle and eats holy bread. This is a sin. Right, remember, this under Levitical law is a sin. Okay. Right? He's not a priest. He's not a priest. He's not even a Levite. I forget which tribe he's from. He's from like one of the.
I think he's from Judah.
Yes. No. Yeah. He was from the tribe of Judah. So he's not even a Levite. He's not even supposed to be anywhere near the priestly things, right? And Jesus looks at the Pharisees, this religious elite, who should know this, and he was like, man.
Well, let's back up a little bit.
Okay.
The crime that they were committing, as Jesus and his followers were walking through a field, they were breaking off heads of grain and eating them.
Yes, they were eating.
That's what they were doing.
Yeah. And what Jesus does is...
we're like, hey, you're harvesting on the Sabbath. You're doing work on the Sabbath. That's not that.
Yeah, I suppose we should... Yeah. They're, and what Jesus' response is, the principle of Jesus' response is... Sabbath was made to serve man, right? So if it does not benefit man, sometimes maybe the rules don't apply. Now, there are other arguments, mostly because the way that the Pharisees set up Sabbath actually came after Leviticus. After Ezra.
Right. There was a lot of Jewish tradition that was playing into it at that point, so you're right. There was some...
Yeah, but you can make the argument that in that case... There is in that very extreme case where Nazis are showing up on your door, asking you, are there Jews here? That it would best serve God's chosen people to break this one rule at one time. It doesn't serve the needs of mankind. So you can make that argument. My own personal counter argument is in that case, just make the truth so absurd they won't believe it. There was a case of that. Some lady modified her enormous machine. I think it was a sewing machine. By attaching it to and it's huge and heavy, she attached it to a hinge so it just would swing. I mean, I imagine it still took effort, but it would swing, and she would hide the Jews in a thing underneath that. And when the Nazis showed up, like, do you have Jews? And so she's like, yeah, they're under the sewing machine. And they're just like, no, they're not. We're out. And she said she didn't have to compromise. So, I mean...
No, I would like to point out, though, she was still engaging in actual deception. Like, the thing is, if you're intending to communicate an accurate truth, which is sort of the core of being honest... then she was still falling short of that moral duty, or at least arguably so. But my point is not that any given thing can or cannot be considered to be a violation of a moral duty. My point is that the very idea of a moral duty harkens back to some kind of consequence that you'll experience,
which I agree with,
either now or in the afterlife, for violating that moral duty. And so there's literally no motivation for me to follow a moral duty if I don't have some kind of idea that maybe I'll suffer a consequence for not fulfilling it, right? Like, is God going to throw me into hell for lying to save the lives of the Jews? Well, maybe I need to take that into consideration, because that's a personal consequence that I will experience for doing that. Yeah. Like, that's why I think about it. If there's no moral duty, like if God says, you have a moral duty not to lie, and I say, well, what happens if I don't? And he says, stone nothing. And I'm like, okay, because think about it this way. In the Garden of Eden, when in the Genesis account, after God creates Adam and Eve and sets them in the garden and grows all these plants around them, he points to the garden, to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life, and essentially says, don't eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because, why? In the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. There's a consequence.
Yes.
He literally points directly to the consequence and says, this is why you shouldn't do that, because you'll die.
Yes. So, essentially what we're all saying is Josh's thesis is correct. At least I agree. I can't think of any reason why you would be wrong, personally.
No.
Okay.
But I'm not an ethicist or a moralist.
Yeah. Now, I do
who
want to
gets
point out
to
that
decide if you are?
this doesn't need to destroy your moral system. Like, if you're watching this right now and you're thinking, oh God, I've done a duty ethics my whole life. I have to, the ends justify the means now. Crap, what am I doing? No, stop, take a deep breath. You're fine. It's okay. Casey, can you explain why that's not a problem?
I'm sure I could if I had thought about an answer, but I have no answer off the top of my head.
Okay. No, that's fine. I'll just break it down for you real quick.
I also wasn't expecting the spotlight, despite the fact that this is my show.
That's because me and Max, I just kind of lulled out for a little while.
Let me just start, and you guys feel free to jump in if you figure something
one of those two things.
Okay, here, no. I think I've got
Maybe
it.
both at once.
think I've got it, Professor Josh. I think I've got it.
Sure.
An eager student. The ends do not always justify the means, because sometimes the means have, negative consequences.
Different ends than you would expect.
Different ends than you would expect. So, did I get there?
No, that's the thing. And if you believe that you have a moral duty to do something, that doesn't mean you're wrong. There may actually be some kind of serious spiritual consequence to lying that makes it so that you should be honest, as honest as you can be with the Nazis about whether or not you're hiding Jews in your basement. It's certainly possible that the moral consequence of taking that action in a spiritual sense, like in the afterlife, is much more devastating and destructive than the immediate consequence of Jews dying, right? It's possible. I don't think so. I personally disagree with that.
Yeah.
But my fundamental thesis is we're all consequentialists and we should admit it.
Yes. And I agree with that.
We can argue about the details of what the consequences are that we're trying to avoid or secure or whatever.
Yes. Thank you, Professor Josh,
You're welcome.
for your delightful lecture. We will probably have more on this podcast. I love this show.
Can I like the steps that I took to get to this thesis, I guess, in some sense were a little interesting. Yeah, it's actually kind of awkward. You know that? Have you ever heard the name Saul Alinsky?
Yes, only because I follow you on Facebook.
Yeah. There's this guy named Saul Alinsky who's quite literally a communist, and I don't find that to be a really huge problem, actually. I know, he in my opinion, he's wrong in his ideology, but a lot of the principles that he taught were pretty spot on.
Because, hold on. Can I interject?
Yeah, sure.
That's, like, I can't remember the name of the, what's the name of that? There's a logical fallacy there, where just because, I think it's ad hominem, that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Just because he's a communist doesn't mean he can't say things that are correct.
Yeah,
right, that's an ad hominem logical. It's an ad hominem logical fallacy. I got there, I think.
Yeah, but I've heard him criticized in an ad hominem sort of sense from within the sort of conservative right-wing community quite a lot, actually. He takes a lot of flack because he wrote a book called Rules for Radicals, which is sort of assumed to be Obama's playbook and all this. It's I could have like 5 podcasts of my own on that, just talking about it. But anyway, the fundamental idea that he talks about in the book is, at least in chapter 2, I believe, which is on ethics and morality. He essentially says, yes, the ends justify the means, and this is why. And this is how everyone has acted for centuries, and this is how everyone's going to keep acting, and you just better get used to it and do the same thing. And he actually has a very persuasive argument. I haven't disconnected. You guys are being really, really, really still right now.
We're listening. I was listening.
I'm intrigued.
Good. Sorry. I thought I'd disconnect. Like, I honestly, you guys are being so quiet and attentive that I actually thought I had disconnected.
I mean, Zane and I can do MSNBC real quick.
Just liven it up.
Later. We're doing that as a skit. It's fine.
Okay.
Oh, goodness. All right. Yeah. Anyway, go.
No, but so Alinsky. I mean, I don't want to get like way too far into the weeds here, but he makes this argument that literally everyone is a consequentialist, and you just should probably just get used to that fact. And like the key example that he brings up is this one from the Declaration of Independence. And if you look at the Declaration of Independence, it's not a fair document. It actually is not a fair document because it charges the King of England for doing all kinds of things, some of which Parliament actually did sort of, some of which the King himself sort of did as commander of the legions of England and all that. But in some sense, it's unfair also because the colonies received a lot of food aid from England in times of starvation and famine. The colonies actually received medical supplies in some cases. They received assistance in combat against the French and the Indians. There was a lot of protection that was given in terms of military, force on behalf of the colonists and their continued survival in the New World.
Which, keep in mind, these were the arguments that all of the Federalists of the time used to make the argument that America needs to stay a British...
Loyalists.
Yeah, the Loyalists, sorry.
No, Federalists are
a different view later
on.
No,
I know.
But and you're right, that was what the Loyalists would say at the time. It's like, well, divorcing ourselves from Great Britain will lose all of these benefits. And the people who were going for independence said, well, but tyranny, Honestly, I think the people who wanted independence were right.
I agree, but yes.
Avoiding tyranny was the right course of action, and history has pretty much proved that
If
correct.
I may say, though, for all the good things that the British had done, at the time, there were a lot of really bad things that England also did, and and
the bad outweighed the good.
Yes, and
I agree on that. But my point is that Alinsky points this out, and he says, look, it may have been 60-40 on the side of the colonists for seceding from Great Britain, essentially, or having this revolution. But you're not going to convince anyone by saying, oh, it's 60-40 on our side, so you should join us. You're not going to convince anyone that way. No. And so the Declaration of Independence literally is 100%, they're evil, we're justified, they've been tyrannical bastards, and we're gonna revolt against them. Right? It's literally 100%, and it's a very unfair document in that sense because it doesn't recognize all the benefits of staying with Great Britain. It's not a rational argument which takes into account the evidence on the other side and tries to come to a reasonable the based on fairly weighing everything in the balance.
It's not the Rogerian argument. It's the whatchamacallit.
Yeah. And so I looked at that and I thought to myself, Alinsky's right, essentially. You don't wind up motivating a lot of people by having this moral upstanding idea of being completely fair in your assessment of things. It's actually one of the most devastating features of American political history right now is that you can't get an honest man into the White House. Why? Because you have to be dishonest about your opponent's good side in order to get to the White House. Like, you have to run attack ads. You have to drag out every backstory, every evil thing. You can't say, well, in all honesty, my opponent is actually kind of a nice human being. You have to be 100%
I like Ted Cruz. I think he's a very nice guy.
No. There's this thing a lot of people say, like, I don't like Bernie Sanders' politics, but his heart is in the right place. A lot of things, like, a lot of Republicans have said that, and so, Sanders has been using that. And I'm not going to say my position on Sanders or anything right now, but I'm saying this as evidence of your point. Like, you have to be dishonest if you want, because Sanders is using these statements that a lot of powerful people have made. I like Sanders' heart. I disagree with this policy. Blah 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 blah. he's been using that, right? So you're right, in the realm of politics, you cannot share your honest opinion about your opponent, really, right?
Not in full, at least.
Not in full,
You can be completely honest about what you hate about them.
Yes.
That's for sure.
You can't
but
be
honest about what you love about them is not an advisable stance to take on national television. It's like, no, you probably shouldn't be praising your opponent.
Yeah. Because I personally I'm not a Sanders supporter, but he said something that I really like. I think it was an MSNBC reporter. No.
Not yet. Finish off with that. How about we finish with that?
I like that.
Yeah.
We'll finish with
because I got
an MSNBC reporter asked Bernie Sanders, should gun manufacturers be held liable for public mass shootings? And Sanders was like, no, that's retarded. And I personally agree with Sanders on that position. That's retarded. We don't hold breweries responsible for drunk drivers or we don't hold there's no joint liability for breweries and car manufacturers for drunk driving accidents.
Yes,
right?
Coors and Ford caused this guy to get in an accident. Let's sue both of them.
Yeah. Coors and Ford. We know that
Ford.
Yeah, right. Like, I agree with Bernie Sanders on that, but it probably wouldn't be best if I was running for president to be like, yeah, I agree with Mr. Sanders on that point. I think he's right on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I would never. I'd probably if somebody brought it up, I'd be like, yeah, I agree, and then I'd sweep it away really quickly, right?
Yeah.
I don't agree with anything else, but that particular.
Yeah, yes, I agree.
I'll just sweep this one right onto the rug here, don't mind that.
You start to get into sort of this the ends justify the means thing, because I don't personally approve. Fundamentally, I think it's a bad thing to be unfair like that. But in terms of getting someone into the White House who can actually, of the various options available to me, I don't really like any of them that much, but there's one or two who are probably better than all the rest, and I'd prefer that they get there.
As far as winnable ones, personally, this is my personal opinion, as far as winnable ones, electable options, and I'm not saying ideal options, I'm saying electable options. Personally, Ted Cruz, and it's all on economics. I disagree with him so much on social issues and social issues and foreign policy. He's way too aggressive.
Yeah. So that's a short political aside, but let me drag it back to ethics here. Ted Cruz has been extremely manipulative. Talk about pandering to various political groups and vilifying his opposition and venerating himself and attacking Donald Trump mercilessly every chance he gets, and so on and so forth. He has not been a fair-minded person who's given a full and complete description of the truth and reality and whether or not he agrees with people on things. That's not something that he's done. And why? Because he kind of has to. He lessens his chances of winning if he is fair-minded about things.
Especially if he wants to beat Donald Trump, he absolutely has to be vicious with the man, even though Trump has said accurate things. I think very few. No, his Second Amendment plan. I thought it was surprisingly, it's a brilliant plan, barring he didn't discuss the logistics of repairing the NICS system, which is National Instant Check System.
Yeah.
He said that because the plan that Trump outlined, very fair, very reasonable. Basically, he wouldn't add any new laws. He wouldn't get rid of any old ones, which I actually kind of disagree there. But whatever. He would basically repair the NICS system. That was his plan. Repair the NICS system, because there are a lot of people who get approved for purchasing a firearm because something mental disability or a past crime that would make them not eligible to purchase a firearm aren't reported to aren't posted to the NICS system, and it's not checked. So he goes through, gets the weapon, goes and commits a crime.
Yeah.
He wants to repair that. That's his plan, and he didn't discuss the logistics, but I agree with that in principle. And you're right. Again, I can't
even if Ted Cruz agrees with that in principle, though, he can't say that on national TV, because at that point he's conceding that his opponent came up with something first.
Yes. And
that he basically got the drop on him and stuff. It's just not politically or strategically a good maneuver for him. No. And that's really, really unfortunate, because personally, I would respect him a whole lot more if he weren't manipulative. Yes. I would feel much more comfortable about his character and what he was going to do as president if he weren't a manipulative bastard.
Yes.
But unless he's a manipulative bastard, he may not ever be president, and that's the problem, right? So in that sense, the ends justify the means, because of the options, I think he's probably the best remaining one.
Again, of electable options.
Yeah, it's complicated.
Ideally, Ron Paul.
Yes, Ron Paul or Austin Peterson.
Which, speaking of Ron Paul,
to the weeds here, you sort of get my point. Where you start seeing these patterns out in society, and it makes you wish things were different. Like I wish you didn't have to be manipulative.
Yes.
I wish people actually approved of honest politicians and statesmanship. I wish statesmanship was like highly valued in our society, but it's not. Politicking is highly valued in our society, and making your opponent look like a total dick is highly valued in our society. Those are the kinds of things that people look for out of the mouths of politicians, and those are the things that are guiding people's voting patterns in the modern age. And that's unfortunate, and I hate it, but as long as that's true, maybe it's better in some cases if you actually have the right principles at the heart to go ahead and be manipulative and get yourself in a position where you can start to change things for the better in some sense. Yeah. I'm just saying, and it's consequentialism, I'll admit it, but Alinsky was right in that sense. And
yes.
And down to the day-to-day level, like this is the last thing that I kind of want to finish out with if we can here.
And then
on a day-to-day level, you act like a total consequentialist. I'm just saying. Think about it. If you ask someone while you're driving with them and they make a left turn, and you ask them, why'd you make that left turn? Well, because this is the direction we need to go. Why are we going this direction? Oh, so that we can get to the theater.
So we can get to the theater.
That's consequentialism. Like, does a person really believe that they have a high moral duty to turn the steering wheel left?
No.
And cause the vehicle to go in that direction? No. No one believes that they have a high moral duty to do that. That's just absurd to think about. Why do they do it? Because that will make the vehicle go left.
Yes.
And then going left will lead to the right route to get to the theater, and so on and so forth. It's entirely consequentialist, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't take a particular route through the streets because for some reason that's been morally ordained on high. So that's kind of on some level an expression of consequentialism, and I mean you can argue that actual morality doesn't really touch on that, but at least at the heart, people's reasons for doing things,
mm-hmm.
I'm firmly convinced, are based on their understanding of what happens when they do them.
I completely agree. Thank you, Professor Josh, for your 17, 18-ish minute lecture with some commentary.
Yeah, it was good.
Wait.